Well, right now the clock is ticking for leaders in Detroit and Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties to reach a deal on that new regional water authority.
When Detroit exited bankruptcy, you might remember this exit plan called for the city to lease its water department to a newly created Great Lakes Water Authority. The lease would last for the next 40 years for $50 million per year.
Now, it needs to be approved by Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan and a majority of the appointees to the Regional Water Authority Board. But as the deadline nears to sign off on one of the few remaining pieces in Detroit's bankruptcy case, some leaders here are crying foul, saying this is a bad deal.
Yeah, specifically, joining us now, Macomb County Executive Mark Hackel. And Mark, you have been very vocal from day one on this right here. What is your problem with this regional authority?
Well, Steve and Joanne, the concern is, the rush to get this done, first and foremost, and the lack of the public information that was put out. So after the MOU was signed and we had, at the request of the courts, a press conference on the first floor of the federal courthouse, we finally got the information out to the public and to the local municipalities that buy water from the city of Detroit. In Macomb County, when I talked to those regional leaders, the people from the municipalities in Macomb County, there was a concern, a lot of concerns over this issue, a lot of assumptions, and as a result of having somebody now part of the Great Lakes Water Authority on board, who is a finance director out of Sterling Heights, a lot of those assumptions aren't realities, a lot of information isn't coming our way, so we're very concerned, and concerned about where we're headed moving forward, not just with efficiencies within the system itself, but really a lot of unanswered questions as to what's going to happen to those rates moving forward. So I want to continue this discussion. I want to try to figure out how do we come up with a better solution, but this time constraint of June 12th is really a concern for us because not a lot of good answers, and I think there's a better opportunity if we sat down and had more discussion to create something that's better for ratepayers moving forward.
A lot of the work on this has really been happening behind closed doors with a gag order in place. You, though, have been really speaking out about all of this. Why have you been so public?
Well, I think it's a public issue. We're talking about water, and the water is still going to run and flow no matter how long this takes to get to the right solution. I got to go back to what was just talked about. They said, hey, we had a secret meeting on Monday. You weren't invited to be in at that meeting, and the question was, why did the meeting, why was it even held when we already have a authority that's in place? And when you talk about having an authority in place, we all have representatives. It's a legal entity. It's supposed to be having discussions in public now as a result of, our creation of it, and yet there's still meetings that are taking place that are somewhat, questionable to me as to why. But then when I hear that, the meeting was intended to begin with because of talking about what was going on with Highland Park, but then again, Highland Park was never talked about, yet when they say, listen, for years this has been happening this way. We have been paying those rates for those that aren't paying for it. That's what happens, and that's going to continue to happen moving forward. That's my big concern. I'm sitting there thinking, hang on, we can't continue to do what we've always done. How do we look at this and assure ratepayers moving forward that that's not going to happen? Well, they need to hear about this. They need to know what we're trying to do.
Yeah, some people would argue what you're trying to do, you've got to negotiate to get it done here. Your counterpart in Oakland County, L. Brooks Patterson, says you, in effect, taking yourself out of the negotiations, out of this ability to talk about it because of this gag order that you refuse to honor.
Well, see, and I don't understand it. When somebody says, I've taken myself out of it. No, I was not invited. And the question is, why wasn't I invited? Because I'm talking about it publicly and bringing this to somebody's attention, that being those who I'm representing. So, in effect, 860,000 people in Macomb County have been left out of the discussions moving forward as a result of their telling me I can't come to the table because I disagree, and we're saying no at this point in time. Well, my gosh, if the legislator was not allowed to have discussions on the floor because someone or some of them said, we disagree, we're going to be voting no, that's inappropriate at best. So the reality is why I'm not asked to or come to these closed door closed door meetings shouldn't be happening anyways. We have a public body that's in place, and it's a Great Lakes Water Authority. They should be having these discussions according to the Open Meetings Act, not behind closed doors. This is what got us to where we're at to begin with. I mean, why we're dealing with these issues today. You'd think that government would start to move forward and try to gain the trust of the public by being more public about the various issues. So I'm attempting to do that, and I know I'm creating some controversy for some. I get that, but I can't just sit back and say, just go along to get along. The reality is this is going to be troubling moving forward.
Do you think this deal will ultimately go through, and if it does not, then what?
You know what, it probably will. And if it does, then I guess we'll still have a seat at the table and try to figure out, how do we make sure that, whatever we do moving forward is going to be protective of the ratepayers. But I still believe a better deal could have happened.
Any recourse if it does go through and you want to try to get something undone that you don't like?
No, it's still going to be that day-to-day, routine of having somebody on board that's going to be able to look at it and say publicly, hopefully, these are concerns, these are problems, and hopefully we're going to be allowed to have that, I guess, if you will, discussion. I think it's healthy and it's necessary, but just to say because you're not agreeing with this deal right now, you're not allowed in these backroom closed-door meetings. Wow, I don't even know how to answer that. Nobody can excuse that. Nobody can explain that and say, you know what, because of the way you're behaving, because of the way you're talking about this publicly, you're just not going to be invited. That's unacceptable.
Real quick
any
before
stretch.
we go, rates likely to go up? People still going to have water no matter what happens, right?
No question about it. It's going to happen.
All right.
Mark Hackel, we thank you for your time today.
Thanks.
Well, beautiful.